everybody. You're listening to podcast episode number 6. I'm Megan, and alongside Jen O'Hara, we are your hosts for the Small Business Bootcamp podcast. Today's episode is a conversation with our most veteran department leader at Kids First Sports Center. We talk with Casey Campbell, our Tumble Bees department leader, a longtime employee of Kids First, and one of the smartest, most creative leaders in our organization. Let's jump in. On today's episode, we have Casey Campbell with us. Casey is one of our longtime employees and is currently leading our Tumble Bees program, which is the largest preschool gymnastics program in the country. We'll be talking with Casey about her history with Kids First, her take on our decentralized structure, our value system, and her advice for other small business owners. Let's jump right in. Welcome, Casey.
Thanks.
Tell us a little bit about your history with Kids First. You are our longest held department leader here. You've been here the longest. So tell us a little bit about that history.
I came to Queen City Gymnastics right after I graduated from college in 97. And so we were down the street. We weren't actually here yet. And I was hired as a compulsory coach, taught classes and Tumble Bees. And we all kind of did all of everything at that time. And then when we moved over here and became Kids First Sports Center in April of 98, is when I became the girls gym jam DL, and I also was responsible for the developmental team at that time, and I still coached a little bit of compulsory teams. And I did that until, 5 years, 6 years, something like that, when I started to have my family, and then I moved from that role to strictly Tumble Bees and a part-time position, and I did that for a number of years, 6, 8, 10. I'm not exactly sure. I worked quite a bit and then got down to a small number when my kids were keeping me busy. And then as my kids went back to school, I started coming back in a bigger role, more hours, more time, and then was able to become Jen's assistant with Tumble Bees after taking on a few other roles within Tumble Bees, doing some show things and adding some other responsibilities. But what we decided in 2016,
I think that's what we decided,
is when I became Jen's assistant until last year. Then I took over when Jen moved out of her seat into the president's seat.
So over 23 years, you're going on 24.
Yes.
And remind us, have you actually left for any part of that time?
I have not left. This was a conversation we had once. Yes, I have always been here. I think one small period of time, maybe one school year, I taught 2 afternoons. So I think I did, 4.5 hours a week. But I was always here in some role in some way from the beginning since 1997.
Right. And I started at Kids First in 1998. So we've worked together for a very long time. And I want to ask you, first of all, I'd like to set the stage a little bit about the Tumble Bee program. So we say you're the department leader of Tumble Bees, which is our preschool gymnastics program. Give us a little bit of idea of the scope and size of that department so we can get a feel really for what your responsibilities on a weekly basis are.
Okay. Well, Tumble Bees is our preschool gymnastics or gross motor development class we consider. Typically, a typical year around this time of year in March, we would have somewhere between 1,500 and 1,700 students. I think it's something like 185 classes. We have about 35 to 40 staff members, depending on the time of year, every day of the week. So 7 days a week we have classes. The majority of our students at this point in time are in what we consider prime time, so in the evening and weekends, but we do have classes during the day for the daytime class or daytime families. Starting at 6 months currently through 6 years old or first grade, we have had classes for infants 6 weeks to 6 months in the past. We haven't brought those back since COVID time, but I hope to do so sooner than later.
Great. So 16 to 1,700 students in your peak, which is like every other gymnastics school's peak, the winter.
Yes.
And you're not currently there yet, but you're growing.
We're growing. We're getting there. I'm feeling, I haven't looked that soon or that recently, but I feel like maybe getting close to 1,000.
Yes.
Getting real close if we're not over that
I did
yet.
Look last week. You are very close.
Very close.
Getting close.
So, yes.
So you've been here for over 2 decades. Why? Why have you stayed here? Why is it fun?
Why is it fun? I think it is fun. That's why I've stayed here for 2 decades. I think it's always been something that I've loved to do. I was in gymnastics as a kid and I started coaching as a 15-year-old and I went to college for sports industry and I have a degree in coaching as well. And I think my goal at that time was I was going to open my own sometime, somewhere. And when I graduated from college, I sort of stumbled into this position. And I remember my dad specifically asking me, like, full-time coaching position, this is what you're going to do. You can support yourself. Yeah, I can. And it's just always really worked out. And it never seemed like the time or the place for me to ever move on. If I was going to do this, if I was going to be in this business, this was the right place. I kind of fell right into the right place. And also it had the flexibility when I needed it in my life. So I was able to back away from the role of a DL and gym jam and coaching to the Tumble Bees. So it just really fit into my life easily. And I always have loved it. I've always kind of said that to all the other people in my life, that I get to do what I love to do. I get to love what I do every single day when I go to work. And I would find it really difficult to find something else to do. And it's a great company, and it's a great group of people that I work with.
So, you talked about you were a department leader maybe before the term was coined. I don't know if Jeff had that. Did he call them department leaders?
Yeah, I believe
in the early,
that we were
the
right
90s?
away.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So you were a department leader in the 90s of at the time, our Funtastics, which is now called that recreational girls gymnastics. Was it girls and boys or just girls?
Just girls.
Okay. So you were a department leader then, and obviously Jeff Metzger was in this office. He was our driving, our president at that time. And that word, we talk about decentralized and how our company is a decentralized structure. And we still have that today. So you've stepped into a new department leader role with Tumble Bees. Can you talk a little bit about what that decentralized structure is like? I feel like we have gym owners that say, is that real? Like, are they really not in your business? Are they really not telling you your schedule or, how your program operates? Talk to us a little bit about that, how that decentralized structure works as a department leader, and what are the benefits or not, the cons of that structure.
Yes, it is a real thing. And I could speak to that specifically when I became the DL of Gym Jam 1,000 years ago, because I really didn't know what I was doing at all. And it was sort of like, ready, set, go. Go ahead. Here you go. And I had to figure it out on the way. But at the same time, I could feel like I could speak to Jeff and ask him questions, and the other DLs who were all very similarly recently new into their positions as well. We kind of figured it out together. Of course, there are centralized things. The bigger that we get, those HR things, those payroll things, those things that thankfully someone else has to worry about, that I don't have to concern myself with, that are important to be centralized. But as far as creating the schedule and the communication I have with the families and how I go about training my staff, hiring my staff, all of that is entirely on my shoulders to do, just like all the other DLs are responsible for those things too, which is great because I do get to do it myself. I don't feel like I have to go ask permission from anyone about how to do anything. I can get guidance and I can ask the questions if I feel I need help. But I really truly hold that responsibility entirely. Each department leader holds that responsibility themselves.
And that can be a heavy burden.
For sure.
What do you find are there any negatives, or as Megan put it, any cons to having such a decentralized company or not?
I think I would find it difficult to point out any cons, mostly because this is the only experience that I've had. This is how it's been all along. I sure it'd be awesome if somebody swooped in and said, hey, you need some new staff. Here you go. Here are 5 people. And they're already trained and they're ready to go. But that isn't how it works. And I like the independence of it too. I like that I get to make my own decisions about things. And obviously we're educated as a whole. So, each department is decentralized from each other, but Jeff has always taken the time to really train us department leaders to educate us on how the finances work and how a company works and how to best put the company's needs first and what that means. And so that's helpful when I'm making any decisions. I have those things to fall back on.
Yeah. I want to stay on this decentralized topic for just a minute. You touched on staff. So does that mean, so you have a staff of how many throughout the year?
35 to 40.
35 to 40 staff members throughout the year. So are you solely responsible for recruiting and interviewing and hiring and training your staff, or does anybody else do that for you and help you with that process?
I would say I do 95% of it myself. Have worked with Emily, our HR department leader, to create ads for Indeed and on the newspaper and that kind of thing. But once they apply through this system, and she has to do her portion of it, the section of submitting the character references and those things, that's something that Emily handles. That's not what I have to handle. But once that is finished, she notifies me that they're in the system, and then I go from there and I interview them myself and decide if I want to hire them and what their pay rate is going to be. And then again, I kind of hand them back to her for a moment where she does the onboarding, the busy work, HR, businessy sorts of things. And so once they're officially hired as an official employee, then they're back entirely in my department.
And what if you have a mishire or somebody's not fitting? Does HR get to fire them for you?
No.
Oh, no.
No. HR, again, is a place I could go if I needed some guidance as to how to do that or make sure that I follow the correct steps. Yeah. But no, that's...
So full autonomy.
Full autonomy, yes. I'm responsible for the decisions that I make, good and bad.
Gotta love it.
I gotta love it.
Can you talk to us a little bit about your... maybe what you've learned over the years in terms of training with staff training and hiring? We get a lot of questions from gym owners about not only about hiring, but I feel like we've touched on the decentralized nature of that. And if somebody has specific questions, they can reach out. But talk to us a little about your training system, because the Tumble Bees staff training system is very developed, and just how that has worked or changes that you've made over the years. What's worked really well for you?
Well, I would say the training for the Tumble Bees is a very established thing that Jen worked on and created. And so that was a great jumping off point for me, for sure. But I can speak to when I was a DL in 98, I did not have any sort of training system whatsoever. And I didn't really have any idea how to do that. So I know
you described the other day, it was just like, go teach.
Here you go.
Here you go. You don't know how
you know how to do a cartwheel?
Yeah.
Great. Come on in. Here's some kids. Have fun.
We've learned a few things.
Yes, for sure. I definitely learned a few things. And I know that for sure that it was not working for me at that time. I remember, I always kind of say, I remember Jeff stopping me in the hall, kind of checking like, hey, how's it going? And I burst into tears. It's like, not well. This is not going well. I'm not doing a very good job. I'm not doing well. And so, which kind of led to that some of the other department leaders were equally struggling with staffing and training and all of it. Again, none of us really knew what we were doing just yet. And so,
because you had moved from the other gym to this gym where everything became very decentralized after you had worked together
right.
within each department. But,
right. It was this, before it was much more of the small gym feel that more gyms are like, where everybody does a little bit of everything and everybody works together. And we all had done that and then came here and very much split apart into our own avenues. But we met. So Jeff organized the department leaders at the time, a handful of us, the gym department leaders. And we met for, I would say, about 6 months. That felt in the conference room for a couple hours every Wednesday afternoon and talked about what did we want from staff? What did we want from a teacher? What made a great teacher? What were we looking for when we moved forward? And how did we train those people to be just as great as the person before them? And which we then developed the teaching principles, which really changed my whole life as far as training and staffing, because I had something concrete to show them and present them and talk to them about. And that is the part that I, especially with now in my Tumble Bees training, that's the part that really matters the most to me first. Like, they have to get those things. We talk about them multiple times. Those are the things that are really the backbone of what we're doing out there. They have to be able to follow those or be aligned with those. And then you can find out pretty quickly whether they are or are they not aligned with those teaching principles. And it's just easy to always fall back to, even when I remind them as they're learning, to fall back on those, to have those as their backbone in their classes. So that really, I think, is the biggest part of the training that has changed things and makes things a lot easier for us, for me, training a new staff member. And then, of course, there are the other things that are important, the curriculum and how we do things, the lesson plans and the procedures for emergencies and all of those kinds of things. But really, I always say to my staff, it's not about the cartwheel or the roll at all. That's not what we're doing here. We're making a relationship with these kids and we're teaching them the big picture things.
So you referenced the teaching principles, which are, we have 11 teaching principles, and that's part of our 26-point value system that we have. And I remember sitting in that conference room. I think sometimes it's important for not just a department leader, but a business owner to identify what that culture is in your organization and does it match what you want it to be. Because every gym club has a culture, and you might want it to be aligned with, let's say, our 26 points, but taking a good hard look at what it is on paper versus what it is inside your walls. And what kind of advice would you give for a new department leader on either reestablishing what that culture needs to be in the department, or how to get to that point, or just identifying what the culture is versus where you want it to be?
Yeah. I think you definitely want to be able to concretely say what those like our unifying principles are. Being able to identify what those things that we're looking for is really important, and being able to say those and have those, kind of concretely in your hands is easier to have a jumping off point with your staff, because you have that's the culture. You've known what you want it to be. And I think if you're a business that have never given that any thought, has not really thought about what matters to them as far as a company, that would be easy to flounder because you don't have anything
right
structured. And that's, I guess, this is our structure. Our structure is your unifying principles and our teaching principles.
Mm-hmm. And I think that those 26 points allow us to be so autonomous, because in those unifying principles, the mission statement, the teaching principles, and the hiring mantras, that's where we're unified.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And then each department has their own ability to have the style or the freedom to move their department however they choose, as long as there's that alignment with those principles.
Mm-hmm. Right. And the principles give you a chance. It's very easy to say, well, am I out of balance? Are we communicating clearly? Are we, the trust? It's always a nice place to be able to step back, especially if you're struggling with your staff in some way. Which of these 7 things are they not aligned with? Which of these 11, things are we not seeing from you? It's just a nice structure backbone to everything that we're doing.
Mm-hmm. And you in the Tumble Bees department, you hire a lot of young people. Mm-hmm. And I know that you enjoy having so many young people. And we hear from gym owners that they struggle with that young generation. We hear them talk about millennials. And I, like you, loved hiring young people. So can you talk to me a little bit about why you love hiring them so young, and maybe which of those teaching principles, for people who haven't heard of them before, what do you come back to the most with them, or what do you hit home, just a couple of them that are the most important to you in that training, or when you're talking to young people about how, working at Tumble Bees, what are the ones you come back to?
Yes, I do. I super love having my young staff, and I always kind of refer that we are Tumble Bees, the preschool department, but at the same time, I also feel the same thing about my teenage staff that I'm trying to do with my preschool children, the kids that they're teaching, is we're trying to promote them to be happy, healthy, responsible adults too. And so I always want them to leave here being a better employee for the next person, or just a better person overall, and to have some pride in this job and the position and what they get to do versus some other job where they're just flipping burgers or taking somebody's money. I want to express to them the importance of what they are doing and the effect that they have on others, and hold themselves up at a higher standard too in everything that they do. So we talk, the last teaching principle is love, empathy, and compassion. And that's the one that is great to end on when I'm going through them, because we've talked about the other pieces that have much more sort of concrete applications within a class. But that love, empathy, compassion one is, hey, if you don't feel these things, if you aren't able to do these things, then it doesn't matter about how great you are with the rest of them. You have to be compassionate with these kids and empathetic, and you have to love what you're doing and love being around them. And I think that's always a great end cap with them. but as far as the other teaching principals, recognizing that they are there to teach them and not just supervise them. We want to add those challenges, and we want to recognize that they need to be moving all the time and not sitting. And we want to talk about forming those relationships and talking and having those questions with them and being excited to see them. I just feel like it's easy for the staff to feel like I do feel like that's guidance to them. I do feel like these steps give them the tools.
A framework.
Give them the tools. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have several things I want to say, but I'm afraid we're going to talk for 2 hours if I open a can of worms. Who or what, since you've been here, has impacted your growth? I know that I worked not alongside you, but in that great big gym. We were both in our early to mid 20s. And I know that I've had a lot of personal growth and professional growth. You figure you've been here almost half your life. Think about that. So who or what has impacted that growth, and where do you think, this might be a tricky question, what has been the greatest growth that you've had in yourself that has made you a better department leader today than you would have been 20 years ago?
Wow. Well, I know for sure that I'm a better department leader now than I was 20 years ago, without a doubt. Because of that experience and because of the people. I think I always have joked to you, Jen, that my bracelet should say WWJD would be what would Jen do, and yours always would be what would Jeff do. I think having those mentors, watching how you've interacted with the staff and with me and the other people that you work with has really been beneficial for me, for sure.
Well, that wasn't a loaded question.
I know.
I wasn't trying to lead you back to me.
I know. But I mean, obviously, I think that you definitely have influenced me over the last 5 years that I've been your assistant, and even before that. So, and I would even say, even before that, back in the day when we were 20-somethings, I feel like, you were somebody who had a certain sense of leadership that I didn't feel like I possessed yet. And so it was definitely somebody that I would watch and learn and listen from. But of course, Jeff, I feel that opportunity to be in that conference room, and even the whole, back to the conference room, the teaching principles, that was a huge learning experience for me to talk with all of the other youngish DLs who we were, all feeling the same thing, but all having the same common goal. And and Jeff always has done a great job guiding you toward an answer, not giving you an answer.
He's a teacher at heart,
right?
So he loves that.
He wants you to think. He teaches you how to think it through.
For sure. I mean, it'd be great if I could be like, "Hey, here's my question." He would say, "Great, here's your answer: A, B, and C."
Yeah.
That's not how anybody learns anything. That's not. It's the same as the 3-year-olds. What did you do the last time you were here? I want you to think about it. I want you to learn and use what you have to propel yourself forward. And so, definitely that. Time with him, I think that it contributes to why Kids First is what it is because he was a great leader and has has done a well giving us those tools to be leaders for other people. I just think I think Mary Chin, she's somebody who was so great to work with she was our DL for hospitality forever. And she had been here years before we were even Kids First. And even now when she's here, I get real excited to see her and go ask her what's your opinion? What's your experience on this? And I really respect what she has to say about that she's had a wealth of experience and a lot of time to have a lot of different situations. And she has some perspective for sure. I think just even just everybody even the younger people, new people here, it's been a great experience to just interact with different people that I wouldn't have otherwise, I think. It's a great company for many reasons, and I've stayed for many, many reasons, but I've loved what I have done here. I've loved the people that I work with. I really love now that I'm a part of a company that is an entirely female executive team. Right. I mean, that's pretty awesome.
Now, that's not intentional. It's
not
like
intentional.
Discriminated against any males.
No, that's right.
But it just so happened that our entire executive team is new post-COVID. From our accountant, our HR, and the president, vice president are all females. take a little pride in that.
Yeah,
we
for
do.
sure.
I go back to, I just think of the history that we're talking about right now. And we're talking about what really has perpetuated the success of Kids First. And that comes down to the culture and who we are as a company. And that has been obviously facilitated by Jeff and his way of thinking and his presence for many, many years. And I go back to that conference room too, and sitting there, being a part of that. I think the greatest component here is the buy-in that the leadership team has to working toward that bigger goal. It's a goal greater than the single department goals, where every single department has targets. You have financial targets, enrollment targets, but being able to have that buy-in that as you hit or strive to hit your targets, you are helping to build the company in all of these other aspects. And I think that's what I enjoy watching when department leaders start to get that, that light bulb
It starts
goes
to
off
click.
a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that also comes from Jeff's goal to teach people how to think. So we talk about the struggle, and I would love for you to, you told the story about sitting on the bench and crying, and when Jeff asked you how things were going, but that struggle and that challenge is exactly the same as that team kid or that class kid that's going through struggle and challenge. And rather than taking that struggle away and doing it for them or giving them the answers, allowing you the opportunity to work your way through it.
Right.
And you wouldn't, I don't think, be the leader you are today if you hadn't had a lot of those experiences.
Right. I assume not.
I mean, I could speak for myself because I had crying moments too, just not in front of anybody.
Yeah, I mean, it's been, like I said, from the very beginning, it felt very much when I started here. And then when I first started working as a 22-year-old from college, I just was looking for a job, and gymnastics was my thing, and I loved it. But I didn't necessarily realize it was going to be where I was going to stay the rest of my life. But then when we came here, and that whole being a part of this and seeing it from the bottom up growing, thinking this is where I wouldn't go anywhere else. Right. This is where I belong. I'm a part of this. I had something to do with this. And that feels really good.
It's always cool for me to hear, because obviously I wasn't around when those conversations happened. But it's so cool to hear you two and Keith and Marty and people that have been here for a long time talk about that history and, you moving from the brown box over here, and just how you guys, Jen brought up the other night, we had a dinner for hitting a ninja goal of 300 ninjas, which was fun. But you talked about being a part of that living history, and to hear you guys that were living that history, and now we are living this history that we're moving. We were the living history of COVID and the life after COVID and what we're going to build from there. But it's just so cool to me that you guys lived it, you saw it, you've been a part of the transformation of Kids First over the last 25 years, right. That, basically as you've moved over. And that's just really, it's always inspiring and very cool for me to hear you guys talk about a time, and what changes that you guys have seen in Kids First over the years. It's just very inspiring. So what are those things, for you having been here so long, Kids First has had so many pivots and changes over the years. And what are some of the ones that you think back on that were huge and instrumental to Kids First, or ones that affected your department at the time? Or, what are some of those big pivots or changes that Kids First has done, largely probably from Jeff, but maybe in the new leadership time? What are some of those pivots and changes that we've made? Because growth is part of our DNA, right. And innovation is one of our unifying principles. So tell me some of the ones that have really impacted you.
Well, I think the first one that comes to my mind is the most immediate one. When we moved in, we moved in the spring of 98. And I feel like by winter of 99, we had already taken down a wall and taken out part of the giant soccer field that was there, because we realized immediately that we needed more gym space, which seemed even crazy at the time. We had gone double. We had doubled what we had from the brown box. And within, a handful of months, realized we needed more space than that. So Jeff making that decision, that to get rid of some department, get rid of a whole entire giant soccer field department to add more gymnastics was amazing to me, that he was able to recognize the need and the growth that had potential. So that sort of opened my eyes a little bit too, of like, oh, I get this. And then being part of the BOA is when you had an opportunity, or when I had the opportunity to get more of that information from the backside of it, and for him to start to explain the numbers to us and explain how he makes those decisions and let us sort of be a part of that discussion. So that was instrumental for me, as far as like, wow, these ready jump with both feet into what could be the next great thing.
Yeah.
And then I think, of course, another big pivot for Tumble Bees would be when we then were able to take over the next soccer space and really have this dedicated Tumble Bees space. That was totally altered the way Tumble Bees went, because I always kind of say to my teenagers, like, back in the day, we had to tear down the equipment. We set them up in the big gym, and we tore it down every day and set it back up, because we were only able to have the gym one evening a week and Saturday mornings. So the majority of our classes were during the day. Well, the shift of the world is that people want to come in the evening, and recognizing that if we had the space, if we had the opportunity to provide space for just Tumble Bees in the evening, that what that would mean for the company. And that was obvious. And it changed the trajectory of Tumble Bees kind of immediately.
Right.
And that was a little bit before, I think, even the recession, when people
It was right after.
Okay. So right when people were switching from being at home, more becoming a dual working family. And so that those primetime classes became really, the percentages changed completely as far as when our people come. Yeah. And I think I feel like growth is always the thing. I think space is always what's holding us back. That's the thing, is even now, even in the COVID world, I feel like everybody wants to come at the same time. And if I had a little bit more space, I could offer these people classes at the time they want to come, but I can't, because I don't have the space. So, understanding, recognizing the value of space in dollars and cents and enrollment, that's something that Jeff has taught us.
Best use of space.
Absolutely.
Greatest return.
Yeah.
And planning for growth. I think Jeff has always been so visionary in planning for growth. I mean, it's the whole reason we have a $60,000 square foot basketball facility next door. He started 10, 12 years ago buying a house and then another house. I mean, he's always been priming kids first for growth and looking ahead past what we currently have, and then what will be the best use of that space when the time is right. I think that that's something that we continue to think about without Jeff as involved, is we have to be thinking about those things. What is the future? Where is the growth? Right. Are we planning for that growth? We know with COVID, enrollment will come back. We know that it's going to come back, and are we ready? And when it happens, where are there going to be shifts in enrollment, and where are we primed for growth in all these different areas, and what can we do to prepare for that? Right. Jeff was always so good at that. And
he's still our visionary. It's not like we don't let him in the building. He's our senior advisor and very much a visionary for what that kind of growth might look like in the future. And Casey did touch on the BOA, which is our board of advisors. And I think that might be a topic for another upcoming episode, but it is, it's an important component to our department leadership program, our department leadership roles. And it's a version of a profit sharing program, though 2020 was a little bare.
Right.
Well, and to me also, it's the education piece of it. And I don't know I couldn't tell you when the financial meeting started to become separate from the BOA. And that's a different opportunity for people who are not on the BOA to, again, get an education piece to understand the business so we can make better decisions or understand the decisions that are being made. Yeah. I think that open book management style and clearly showing us where all the numbers lie and why they're there and how we can change them.
And having the opportunity to ask those questions.
Yeah.
Seeing how much we spend on toilet paper or printer paper or whatever it might be. Again, that goes back to our leadership style, which is sharing perspective and not trying to convince anybody of anything, but giving the information so everyone is reading from the same
reasonable
pages. Reasonable people given the same information will likely come to the same conclusion.
And I do try to do that a little bit with my staff, more so my grown-up, I refer to them as my grown-up staff, but for them to understand those things too, why ratios matter and why why I'm making the decisions or need to make decisions, or asking them, here's the information, here's what I have. What, again, reasonably, do you see the same thing that I see? Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's great for them to understand.
That buy-in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
for sure.
Well, you talked a minute ago about how I had some influence on your leadership. I just want to take a minute to say that you very much influenced some of what became important to me in Tumble Bees. And I know that I've shared this with you before, but you and I weren't as close when I took over Tumble Bees as we are now. Mm-hmm. And I had gone from teaching double backs and floor routine sets and flight series to building mountains and trying to figure out what a birdie on a perch was.
Donkey kicks.
It's
my favorite.
And so I was very pleased with myself when I set up probably 7 stations, and I had you come and check them out, and you're looking around and you said, these are pretty good. They're kind of flat. There's not a lot of height changes, but they're fine. And to me, that was a big moment, because I had zero experience in what Tumble Bees had been up to that point. And I had certain goals in my own mind. And from then on out, I mean, even the station creation that we used up until the day I left, which is how to create stations, was very much influenced by that conversation. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. I know you didn't really appreciate it right away in that moment.
I had some choice words, but they were all
Openness
in my mind.
defeats guardedness, folks. Right. Openness defeats guardedness.
Yes. Sometimes it's hard to hear those things that what you could have said is it's great, and I would have continued to make flat stations.
Do the same thing.
Right.
I appreciated your effort, but I just wanted.
It was great.
That's the worst. I appreciate your effort,
and you asked my opinion, I'm
did.
going to give it to you.
Yes, you were very open,
open and forthright.
That's right.
Another unifying principle. Casey, what's still challenging in your role?
Oh, I find lots of things are challenging at this moment. I think. COVID has been a weird thing for everybody in the world, but it put us sort of, I was in a certain place, moving in a certain direction at a certain speed, and then everything came to a complete stop. And so stopping everything and starting again with much lower enrollment and less staff, and really trying to make those harder decisions where a year ago, I had a little bit more wiggle room for things. Mm-hmm. And so I feel like the biggest challenge for me right now is and I've said this to you guys recently, I feel like I'm just doing the day-to-day things. Mm-hmm. I'm doing a lot of C tasks and not getting to the A and B tasks that Jeff would, in boot camp, he talks about that. So that's my challenge that I recognize, and I know it exists, and I'm working on trying to figure out the best way to delegate some responsibilities so that I can get to those, bigger picture movements that do move us forward, that will keep Tumble Bees going in a forward direction, because we don't want to just, I always think there's a balance between trying not to don't fix what's not broken, but at the same time, not just standing still in one spot. Right. Let's try something new. Let's do something different. But it's okay to do the same song that we've done for 25 years, because it's a great song, and these kids have never heard it before.
Right. Right. Interesting. You brought up delegation. On our previous episode, Jeff talked in great detail about the difference between delegating and relegating. And it's nice to hear that our people are understanding how that understand that little component of delegation can reap really big rewards for you. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And in COVID, it's hard to delegate because we're all watching our dollars.
Right. So, and again, this all happened a little bit at the same time. The shift change between when you left the department. I feel like I have said, I was running Tumble Bees the day to day. I was doing the C tasks for you for a while you got to do the A's and B's, the important things. And so, basically when the shift happened is sort of when COVID hit. And so I haven't had a chance to catch up and try to find the next person that can help me on somebody
to keep your boxes on the truck.
Yeah.
Casey has a great analogy. As my assistant, she felt it was her role to keep my boxes on my truck and not let anybody throw more boxes on or not let any boxes fall off. And Right now, she doesn't have that. Her boxes are toppling.
Right.
Here and there.
I'm pushing the truck and picking up the boxes at the same time.
Yeah.
But we're getting there. I feel good about enrollment improving and the state of the world. And I feel good about my staff. And so I feel I'm ready to try that next step for sure.
Do you feel like your clients are coming back more forgiving of missteps, or are they very concerned?
Oh, no, I think for sure. I was prepared in June when we first opened. I felt that was going to be all I was going to be doing was sort of
damage control. And
really, I think I can count on one hand the issues that I've had with parents, and they haven't even really been issues. They've just needed to talk something through. They just needed a little reassurance or needed to explain to me how they felt about things. So I have been overwhelmed by that because that was not what I expected at all. And I do feel like the people who are here feel good about what we're doing and feel good about what we're trying to provide for their kids and know that it's important. So I do feel like people are forgiving for us for sure. And they're okay. And I find the numbers are improving, and I feel like people are coming back because they are feeling more comfortable in their own lives. Mm-hmm. So it'll be nice it'll be great when this is what we talk about. That remember when this year happened.
I can't wait.
But yeah.
Do you have any more questions for Casey before we move into a little lightning round?
I'm super excited. Well, the one final thing I would ask is, and maybe we've already talked about it, but do you have any specific laser-focused pieces of advice for gym club owners or new department leaders, one or the other?
I thought about this. You asked me this before, and I think my first reaction is the kind of this too will pass. You will always, which is good and bad. You may be overstaffed, but that was only for a small period of time, and then you might be understaffed, and that's a small. Like things are always changing, and so this too will pass. Whatever it is, even if it's a great moment, get ready. It's not always going to stay this great. There's going to be another challenge that's going to pop up, another box getting thrown on your truck, or vice versa. I think. This, whatever you're struggling with in this moment, you're going to get through it to the other side.
It's a great piece of advice.
That is great.
Well, we like to end each podcast just asking some rapid fire questions. Do you have a favorite quote?
Oh gosh, I love quotes. I don't know if I have one off the top of my head. Oh, I do. I have one. This is one I learned when I had infants. Start as you mean to go on. So that's my favorite quote.
That's the one I thought you would say.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Can you explain that?
So I read a book about babies when I had a baby, and this English nanny essentially wrote this book, and she meant if you don't intend for your child at 9 to stand on the kitchen table, you should not let your baby at 18 months stand on the kitchen table, or whatever your intent is. If your big picture down the road is for this to be the thing, then start doing that today. Whatever your goal is, you start today and do that. That should always be.
So could you say it one more time?
Say it one more time, yeah.
Start as you mean to go on.
I love that. Do you have any favorite book or anything that you're currently reading? Like you have time for that, but maybe you do.
I used to read all the time. Probably my favorite book. Gosh, I have many, but one of my favorite books is probably The Book Thief.
Oh, haven't heard of that. Is it fiction?
It's young adult, believe it or not, but it's about World War II, and very, very interesting tale. It's narrated by Death.
Yeah.
If you can. So anyway, Marcus Zucker, I think is his last name. Marcus starts with a Z, whatever his last name is. But The Book Thief, it's great.
Okay. Do you have any favorite tool, could be physical or digital, that's made your life easier? Could be at work or personally.
Oh. I have a pocket monkey.
What is that?
It's this little piece of metal thing that's like a size of a credit card that has all sorts of things on it. Like you could measure something or wrap your earbuds around, or a screwdriver, and
just one of those.
Yeah, like
so many things in one.
What people don't know about Casey is I don't know if it's an engineer mind you have, but she has a lot of similarities to Jeff, actually. So I would say probably an engineer mind. So that doesn't really surprise me that it's the pocket monkey and not some digital app.
Tool like Reese had.
Right.
Yeah, no, I'm not so techie. That's not really that's not my thing really so much.
And finally, do you have any particular piece of advice or a nugget of wisdom that stuck with you for a long time?
That's a hard one.
Putting you on the spot there.
I think I just have always tried to just look for the positive just, there's always something better or good happening with you. And I always try to look for the sunshiny part of everything that's always happened with me. I'm not the
silver lining.
Yeah, I'm a silver lining person for sure.
Okay. Well, it's been fun. I think, we're certainly so happy to have you. Not just, I think Jen and I consider you part of our leadership. It's not, you're not just a DL. I think that we appreciate your creativity and your just your intelligence in all levels. I think we always are like, oh, let's just go ask Casey. It's been so fun to have you on here. I think we'll certainly, whatever questions people have, we'll maybe do a follow-up and see where we're at, very shortly. I know that Tumble Bees has certainly been climbing, and that's in large part due to you.
I would like to add too, for all the people out there listening, that not only did Casey take over the department leader position for Tumble Bees just as COVID hit, but she was also very pivotal in the research and development and kickoff of our Ninja program, and has been a great resource for Reese. And I think he referenced that many times. And around here, oftentimes we work with people who are our friends and become like family to us. And certainly over the time that we've spent in Tumble Bees together, we've been very close. And it's been really great to sit here and just chit chat about what's hard and what's fun and what we've learned, and to just kind of review history a little bit. And really fun to consider what next year brings. This year and next year brings. Yeah.
Well, thanks for having me.
All right. Well, we'll hop off of here. Until next time.
All right.
Bye.
Thanks for watching today's episode of the Small Business Bootcamp podcast. We look forward to more conversations with Kids First department leaders and other gymnastics industry business owners. For more information about our Small Business Bootcamp held twice a year in Cincinnati, Ohio, go to www.metzgerbootcamp.com. Our next bootcamp is May 20th through the 24th, 2021. We'd love to see you there. Thanks for tuning in, and subscribe to our podcast on Spotify, Google, or Apple Podcasts. Until next time, stay positive and keep moving forward.